Hey guys, and welcome back to the next episode of the Kotlin tutorial series. In this episode, we're gonna get to know the basic data types of Kotlin and one specific data type which is only available in Kotlin. And in the next episode, we will go over array and strings. So to get to the documentation, we're just gonna head over to kotlinlang.org. That's the website of Kotlin, and here you'll find everything you need to know to get started. We're gonna head in the upper right corner to the docs, the documentation, then gonna go to go to concepts, types, basic types, and overview. And here we have the basic types which we're gonna get to know. Numbers and unsigned counterparts, booleans, characters, string and arrays. String and arrays will be covered in the next episode. So in the number section, we are having all the types we already know from other programming languages like Java, JavaScript, and so on. So byte, short, int, and long. And some floating types like float or double. That's gonna have a decimal like pi, as it is explained here. So to get started and to try it out yourself, we're just gonna make a new Kotlin class file. Name that however you want. For me, it's episode 4, and in that we'll zoom a little bit in so you guys can see it more easily. We will have the main function just to be able to give something out to the console if we want to do that. So we are going to define some whole numbers, so like 1, 2, 3, and so on. And for that, we're going to create a variable of age. And we say age is always a round number. So like you're turning 18, 19, 20. So we're going to say it's an integer and predefine it with 12. So, and now we can print out the age. And age would be printed out in the console as 12. But as we have seen here and go over the integer, we are only able to store a min value of minus 2,147,483,648. 2 billion. And if you try that out, so as you can see right down here, it's 12. So everything works, and we're gonna get over another testing. So as you see, only 2 billion is the max value you can store. And if you try to add zeros to this integer, at some point it will be underlined red as it is too large. If you want to store that amount of numbers or value in one variable, we will need to change the var age to the type long. And if we head over to documentation again, long can store a more greater value than integer. So we're gonna accept this change, make it a long, and now we're gonna be able to add another couple of zeros to the value. So this is okay, and another 0 that is also too large for long, and no fix is available for this. So we're just gonna leave it as 12. Okay, so we covered the long variable, and now if you want to store like a small value of bytes, we're gonna be able to do that again, since long or an integer would be too large to store it in our computer. That would be much space wasted. We are gonna try that again and say var age int. Just for reference, this would be a byte, and we're gonna get in the documentation. Byte only needs 8 bits of memory or disk space on our computer, and integer would need 32 bits on our disk, and a max value of byte is 127, and a normal person will turn 80 or 90 or even in some cases 100, but not more. So it's totally fine to do the age definition in a byte, and as we have seen above, we're gonna also say that's 12. So if we wanna cover like in an exchange, or if we are at a checkout, we need a number, like your total amount is $12.47, so like that. An integer would not be able to store that. Like if you try make an total amount, that's the variable name, and say we want to store it in an integer, and say the integer is 1247, it gets red underlined since we can't use numbers with a decimal point which are not whole numbers. So if we are sure we need this decimal number, we're gonna need the total amount of a float or a double. Let's make it with a double. 12.1247, and this is not, let's comment it out first of all, so the variable name is not already in use. So that seems to be fine, but now the whole definition, what we want to store, is underlined red, because if we want to store something in a double or in a float, the name is totally okay, the type is totally okay, but for me, the value I want to assign to that variable is underlined. For me, decimal point is a point, and if you're from Germany, like I am, we would say we need a semicolon, but actually you need to make a point instead of a semicolon, since the programming language is coded in English, and therefore commas or semicolons for your English speakers is not being able to be processed. So an F, so that's the total, and that's totally fine to be assigned to the total amount to the variable again. So since we covered the double, next we wanna make a float. So we are just gonna start like we did for the total amount. We wanna say angle, like you have a triangle and you want to save all the angles on the outside so they are greater than 180 degrees, and you want to say that's definitely a float. I want to use a float for that, and we're going to say it's 160.0 or 0.3. So this will be underlined red, since a float could also be defined as a double. If I don't say what type I want to be using, we can check it's using a double. Just hover over your variable name, and it's gonna say what it would like to use. So since we want to use a float, we're gonna say float, and append to our number an F. So that's it. Totally fine. The compiler would be fine for that. Cool. Now we are getting to the Boolean. Booleans will only be used or can only be set to two different variables, true and false. We could go with took medications. You need to take 2 medications a day, and that's a Boolean. And we're gonna set that to false. Or we could say a Boolean to true. But if you want to say set the Boolean to 2, that's not able to be processed. Can say that's false, and after that medications are true. So that's reassigning the value for this variable again. And then we can head over to documentation once again, and then beneath numbers there's another part, unsigned integer numbers. Those unsigned integer numbers are a special type Kotlin developed, since some values can't be less than 0. For example, your age, you can't be -1 years old. For that type, Kotlin developed, or the team behind Kotlin developed, an unsigned integer of byte, short, int or long, which all have in common the min value is 0, but the max value is 255 for the byte, for example. And if you head over to numbers again, we can see the byte takes the same space on your disk or in memory. But if you use a normal byte, we have a min value of -128 and a max of 127. But if you use an unsigned byte, a U byte, this U byte will take 8 bits again of your memory, has a min value of 0 and a max value of 255, so 2 times greater than using a regular byte. And to use that, we're gonna make the next section U-signed types, and we say the h2, since we use the h int and h above, will be a U byte and assign -1. So that has 2 reasons why this -1 is underlined. First of all, U bytes can't be negative, and second of all, if we did not predefine this part of our code, the value would be okay, but if you hover over that, it would be defined as an integer. So to get away with that, we're gonna append a U behind that, and now only the -1 and the negative symbol will be underlined red, since it can't be negative. So if you want to store negative values, you need to use a normal byte or an int. But if you are using only positive numbers, you can use a U byte, an unsigned byte. Yeah, and just like that, we can reassign this h2 to be 12. But again, reassigning is totally fine since it's defined as a var, but we're gonna need to append a U again, and that is now totally fine. So we covered the basics. You need to know about types and covered a short portion of unsigned stuff, also covered booleans, and now characters. Characters are just one piece of information you can store in them. Characters. So you just simply create another one and say the name is char1 of any, and say that's a char. So char can't be assigned just like a normal letter. I just can't assign like Z to this simply. I need to have some quotes to assign a char to a variable. But since only one can be used, if I want to store 2, that's too long, and I should rather use a string. But we will cover strings in the next episode, since we will cover strings in the next episode, since that's a large project, and you will use the strings way more often than simply characters. Strings and arrays will be in the next episode. Thank you for watching this episode. Stay tuned for the next, where we will discover the strings and arrays, and have a great evening. Bye bye.